Today on Growing Bolder, Gold Star mother Kelly Kowal is moving forward after the heartbreaking loss of her son by lifting up other veterans and their families. Then, preserving the stories of America's greatest generation is this documentary filmmaker's passion. And you'll meet a 9/11 widow who honors her husband's life by fostering a kinder world.
We want the day to not be remembered for the horror and devastation that it called, for the hatred that caused it, but we want it to be remembered for the people who died, the heroes that came from that day, and for the kindness that circulated across the country.
Those stories and more ahead on Growing Bolder. We're not made to withdraw from life. We're made to seize each moment and to value every breath. We're made to be bold, to take risk, and to help others. We are the most creative, fearless, passionate being that has ever walked the face of the earth. Don't identify with limitation. Embrace possibility. This is not the beginning of the end. This is the beginning of what's next. This is Growing Bolder.
Support for Growing Bolder provided by
A financial plan should help grow and protect your money. An annuity can help cover essential expenses in retirement. You can find a financial professional to show you how at protectedincome.org.
Hi, I'm Mark Middleton, and this is Growing Bolder. Life is going to present us with countless opportunities to give up and give in, or to find a way to keep moving forward. And as we're going to see today, many of those who do move forward then find a way to help others themselves. It's a powerful example of moving forward and giving back. Let's start with a couple of stories about U.S. veterans, because their struggles are also shared with and their sacrifices suffered by their families. One of Amy Sweezy's personal passions is sharing the stories of veterans and their families, which ultimately includes just about every family in America when you consider that there are now nearly 20 million U.S. veterans living in the U.S. That's about 8% of our total adult population. And of course, countless others who are no longer with us after making the ultimate sacrifice.
In 2009, Kelly Kowal lost her son Corey. He was killed on a combat mission in Afghanistan. As part of her grieving process, Kelly created a retreat near Tampa, Florida for military families, veterans, and other first responders. I caught up with Kelly at a ceremony recognizing her tireless work by an organization called Tribute to the Troops. We talked about Corey and the retreat center she started with less than $500 and nothing but her faith.
He wanted to be airborne ranger so bad that he used to practice jumping out of trees.
Corey had been in the country for 6 weeks. For 6 weeks. He talked to his mother on the phone 3 days before the incident happened. It was her birthday. He said, "I'm not going to lie to you. It's dicey here." He said, "If I die here, I am okay dying, fighting for my country." He was a son. He was her pride and joy. And he was a U.S. Army paratrooper in the 2nd of the 508th Airborne Infantry. And this is his mother.
My son was so selfless. And he cared about everyone. And if I can just, he gave us life. So if I can just do a portion of what he used to do and what he's done, I'll be okay.
Kelly found that portion with help from her son, creating a retreat center for veterans, active military, first responders, and Blue, Silver, and Gold Star families.
It started with my son contacting me from heaven right after he was killed in Afghanistan. and he wanted me to buy a boat. And my mother and I had a very good laugh over the thought of me being a boat captain. But he kept coming to me in a dream wanting me to buy the boat, and by the 5th night, I literally sat up in bed and looked up at heaven and said, "Son, please, please, please don't make me buy this boat." But he got his way. I did purchase a boat and started taking out veterans and active duty and families of the fallen to the places he and I used to love to go to out on the water. About 10 months into it, some of the veterans, Korean, World War II, Vietnam veterans, we're talking 50 plus years ago that they were on a battlefield. I noticed that some of them were still struggling with the loss of their brothers in arms, more than I was with the loss of my son, which had only been 10 months. And I'm like, what's wrong with this? I mean, what is going on here? And in researching it, I realized that when they're in theater and they lose a brother, they do not have the luxury of being able to go into the natural grief cycle and to kind of have their body go into a frozen state for a little while. And so by the time they get back to US soil and could grieve, they don't want to because it's hell, and they just got out of hell. I would describe it as a retreat center with cottages that they can come and utilize on vacation. I mean, it's very cost effective for a private on a private's pay or somebody that's on disability income. And if we have somebody that can't afford it, we will go out and raise the funds for them, for their stay. The payoff is when you have somebody, a veteran, come to you or an active duty soldier come to you and say, if it weren't for this place, I don't think I would be here today. That's the payoff. And you can't put a price on that. It is the perfect piece of property. It's just, people feel very relaxed when they come here. We try to set up little pocket areas around the property where they can come and just sit and listen to the water or the sounds of the dog tags or the flags flapping and just be able to reflect. You ask anybody that has lost a loved one and they will tell you that grief process is something they never want to have to go through again. Even though you do it for the rest of your life, the first several years are the hardest, only because you learn to carry the grief a little better as you move forward. And so by not doing the grief work, trying to keep it stuffed, I really think it's one of the reasons our suicide rate is so high among our veterans, because they hit another major bump in the road, another loss. And now they're trying to deal with the grief of that, but then they're also trying to deal with the grief of their brothers in arms. And it becomes overwhelming for them. I don't know if I would have had the courage to start this, knowing how big it was going to be.
It was a challenge from the beginning. When Kelly bought the property, it took weeks of 8 to 10-hour days just to remove the debris. Then, 3 weeks after the purchase, Tropical Storm Debbie hit, taking the roof off and shaking her faith.
I was asking God and my son, why? I mean, I stepped off this huge ledge taking on this project here, and now you've taken the roof, and I don't understand. Did I misinterpret? Are you mad that I bought this property? I'm not sure. I thought you wanted me to do this. And the very next day, I got a phone call from a roofing company that said, we heard you lost your roof, and we would like to come down next weekend and put a new roof on for you. Had I gone out begging for a roof, I don't know that I would have found a roofing company to do that. But because of the storm, we got a new roof. And I think that was the lesson that I really needed to learn, was that sometimes bad things have to happen for something good to come out of it. So now when something bad happens, instead of having that knee-jerk reaction of, oh my God, this is horrible, and going down that rabbit hole, I try now to say, okay, So what good is going to come from this? And start looking for the signs that are going to tell me what good is going to come from it.
Kelly found her path forward by learning to look for the good that can result from the bad. But you have to look for it, and you have to be open to it, and then you have to act upon it. And as Kelly discovered in her own life, helping others is a powerful way to deal with your own loss and process your own grief. Tim Gray is another great example of following your passion, reinventing yourself, and finding a way to make a difference. Tim is a former TV sportscaster whose passion has always been World War II. Not necessarily the war itself, but the stories of those young Americans who were willing to give their lives, and in many cases did, to save the world. Tim founded the nonprofit World War II Foundation to honor the legacy of America's greatest generation. To date, Tim has produced over 30 award-winning educational documentary films, and he's not slowing down. Because of the 16 million Americans who served in World War II, only an estimated 100,000 are still alive today. Inside the Veterans Memorial Auditorium in Providence, Rhode Island, documentary filmmaker Tim Gray is honoring World War II veterans.
When you saw the faces of those Dutch people, women, children, could have been your own people. Then you knew why you were there. Then you knew why you had to kill them.
It's applause long overdue, and it's why Gray left a successful career as a TV sportscaster to reconnect with a childhood fascination.
When I was 6 years old, I picked up one of those World War II encyclopedias and was just fascinated by the time period and the personal drama. I mean, you had good and you had evil, you had heroes, you had cowards, you had just amazing stories from both the Pacific and Europe.
Gray was especially fascinated with the men who willingly risked their lives as teenagers to join the battle. Building upon the tools of a skilled journalist, Gray quickly transformed himself into an award-winning filmmaker.
For 5 years, Germany had left behind a trail of death and oppression across the countries of Europe. It was now time to end Nazi aggression. Operation Overlord was about to begin. American youth signed up for the fight by the millions.
And it goes back to writing. I think it's just all about how to tell a story and learn from some great people and some great TV markets about how to tell a story, how to tell it concisely and get the facts in there and make it entertaining and make it something that people want to watch.
Mission accomplished. His first 2 films ran on PBS stations nationwide, and Gray was honored with Emmy Awards for both.
Battles are won really in the hearts and the minds of the soldiers who are fighting them.
Allied Supreme Commander General Dwight D. Eisenhower was placing the future of the world squarely in the hands of soldiers just old enough to drive a car or take a sip of beer.
The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. We will accept nothing less than full victory.
The way I feel is anybody that said they weren't afraid is a lot of baloney. I mean, I was scared.
This is the supreme moment of invasion. This is frontal assault on an entrenched enemy.
Well, when you think about it, you know, an entrenched enemy in pillboxes, looking down on the beach with machine guns and cannon, and those soldiers crossed that beach. It took an awful lot of guts.
All of a sudden, bullets were hitting on the side of the ship and the water, and I looked into the well of the boat, and there was 35 soldiers in there, and I don't think there was an atheist in there because every one of us was making a sign of the cross as we were going in. And the soldiers started pouring out, and I seen them dropping. I seen them getting shot. God, it was an awful sight. It's a sight I'll never forget. It's been in my mind since. This is the first time I ever talked about it. I hope it's my last.
I never said much about it because I don't want to keep remembering it. You know, the less I talk about it, the better it is.
Perhaps Gray's greatest skill is his ability to get veterans to share their painful stories. He does that by earning their respect. He does that by doing his homework.
you know enough that I think they appreciate you've done some research into it and know what they went through and the enemy they faced, the conditions they fought under. It just really goes with knowing where they fought, and I think that you develop a relationship right off the bat.
Gray knows World War II vets as well as anyone alive and says their most prominent personality trait is not their bravery, but their humility.
When they fought in the war, they didn't complain. When they came home from the war, they didn't complain because they went through the Depression. It was a bad time in the 1930s. So, you know, their parents taught them, you do a job, you do it right, you finish it, and you move on to the next thing. So that's the biggest thing I've learned, is that these men and women looked at this as another job.
Telling their stories is anything but another job for Gray. He has 4 more World War II projects in development, and he's working against the most important deadline of his career.
My deadline is that these guys, these men and women, are passing away at a rapid rate, and they're at the point in their lives where a lot of them are willing to share their stories now, if asked. They generally don't volunteer, but if they're asked, they're willing to share their stories. So, yeah, I mean, I'm up against it. Most of these guys, men and women, are going to be gone in the next 5 to 10 years, and then it's all over.
Until then, he's pursuing World War II vets all over the globe, helping them return to the battlefields that claimed the lives of their friends, shaped their lives, and preserved our way of life.
So peaceful. The price that was paid for this.
Their souls may have been committed to God, but their names still echo across this hallowed ground.
Corporal George R. Bailey, Private Andrew
Staff Sergeant Joseph E.L. Diovito,
Theodore J. Mark.
The French have passed on the stories of the American liberators to their children and grandchildren, who fully understand the sacrifices they made, the price they paid 6 decades ago.
So thank you for your grandmothers and fathers that made us helped us win the war.
It's the kind of honor and respect that Gray wishes these men received at home. Telling their stories is his way of not only saying thank you, but also helping them come to terms with the nightmare they experienced on these beaches as teenagers.
It looks like God put his hand here and straightened it out. Unbelievable. Now I want to see it this way. I'm going to remember it this way, not the way it was. This is real beautiful, peaceful.
Not a bad day's work for a former TV sportscaster who had the courage to take a chance and chase an even bigger dream.
One thing we all have in common, no matter who we are, is at some point in our lives something tragic will happen to us or someone we love. No warning, no preparation, and in an instant our lives will be different. Loss of a spouse, a diagnosis, even death. It happens all the time, but not like this. Christy Coombs' husband was on one of the planes that crashed into the World Trade Center. You think 9/11 changed you? Well, she found a way to go on, and she says we can too.
Everybody experiences some kind of loss, some kind of tragedy in their lifetime. And because my husband died on 9/11 doesn't make it any more tragic, any more terrible. It's just something that happened publicly, and we've had to grieve publicly. And in some ways, it's cathartic, because come September 11th, we know people remember what happened. They reach out and they offer their condolences, and they realize that 20 years later, the loss doesn't go away, it's still with us. Whereas if he died, of a heart attack or a car accident or something, the anniversary of his death would just slip by, except with the people that knew us well. And so it's difficult and it's cathartic at the same time. It's very difficult to explain.
Difficult to explain, nearly impossible to process. No one chooses to go through loss, but Coombs did choose how she would go through it. She chose to make a difference and to lend a helping hand to anyone struggling with loss.
Well, we created a foundation about a year after Jeff's death, because I just found myself in this dark hole of grief, and I needed a way to work through it. One way I put it is that a blanket of kindness was wrapped around my kids and me. And that's really what got us through initially. And I wanted to show my kids that when people do nice things for you, you do nice things for others.
Coombs' private grief was suffered in a most public way, pushing her into a role she never expected but has chosen to embrace.
So we created the Jeffrey Coombs Memorial Foundation, which would help families in Massachusetts who were having a hard time financially because of death, illness, job loss, divorce, things beyond their control. So in the past 20 years, we've raised and distributed well over $1 million. So people ask me all the time, how do you do what you do? And my response is always, I started it for selfish reasons, and I've kept it going for partially selfish reasons, because it really gives me purpose. It gives me something to do. It gives my kids, who are now adults, gives them an opportunity to help others, and certainly gives young people in our town an opportunity to pay it forward and see the good that can come from a tragedy. People will reach out to me and say, so-and-so just lost a family member. Can you talk to them? Can you just help them through and let them know that although now they can't see what's on the other side, they know that in a couple of years, they will be in a better place. You always suffer the loss, you feel it every day, but you get to a place where it feels different, and it's easier to manage. It doesn't get easier losing the person, but it gets different, so your heart learns how to manage it better.
Some find a way forward, others become lost in bitterness and hate. To Coombs, the choice was clear.
Well, as I explained to my kids, I said, there was a lot of animosity against the Muslim people at that time. And I said to my kids, it wasn't the Muslims that did this. It was the radicals. It's just like, I brought my kids up in the Catholic Church. I was raised Catholic. And I said, it's just as if a Catholic person goes and does something horrendous. It doesn't mean that it's all Catholics that are bad. And I wanted my kids to know that anger, it's okay to feel anger on occasion, but to harbor the anger and to feel angry all the time and to feel like, it was directed at us, or just to feel bitter, is not going to help us at all in our healing. We need to let the anger out that we did feel, yes, but it wouldn't do us any good to always feel angry and to always feel like, our lives are cheated, because there's a lot of people in our situation. 20 years is a long time. It's not something you get over. It's something you work through, and you find a way to live happily in spite of it and without them, because you have to, not because you want to. So we live every day, with intention. We try to do as much good as we can, because that's the kind of person Jeff was. And working with Project 351, the youth service organization, we work with them, they work with us to keep 9/11 as a national day of service, focusing the kids on service-oriented programs and why it's so important to give back to their communities. We want the day to not be remembered for the horror and devastation that it called, for the hatred that caused it, but we want it to be remembered for the people who died, the heroes that came from that day, and for the kindness that not only served my family and helped us through, but for the kindness that circulated across the country.
If Christy Coombs could change what happened, she would, but it did happen. And ultimately, she felt she owed it to her husband to move forward with strength, direction, and compassion. She said she learned that even though her loss was news around the world, that we all suffer similar losses. She believes the way to move forward is not by isolating, but by reaching out, not with hate, but with heart, by using the memory of our loved ones as inspiration to make a difference in the lives of others.
I think we've all lived long enough to know to expect the unexpected. And I think we all wonder how we would respond to a major setback or even a devastating tragedy. Would we be able to not just find our way forward, but to rediscover happiness? The reason we share these stories is because the answer is yes, an emphatic yes, a difficult yes, a yes that can be filled with struggle and sadness and heartbreak. But the answer is yes. And as we've learned today, the key is to honor the past, to cherish the present and to stay focused on a better future. And most importantly, never forget that we're all in this together. We're all on the same team, part of the same community, and when we do move forward, we are obligated to give back, because that's growing bolder. We'll see you next time.
Support for Growing Bolder provided by
A financial plan should help grow and protect your money. An annuity can help cover essential expenses in retirement. You can find a financial professional to show you how at protectedincome.org.
Watch previous seasons of Growing Bolder plus bonus stories via our new free streaming app. More information at growingbolder.com/TV. And you can get inspired to plan your what's next when you connect with the Growing Bolder community on Facebook. Show the world you're growing bolder with official Growing Bolder products. Growing Bolder tees and hats are available for $25 each. Custom mugs are $15, and inspiring Tear and Share postcards featuring original artwork and bold messages are $15 plus shipping and handling. All items are available at growingbolder.com/shop.